Hello and welcome to Heroic Media. I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman. This week on Heroic Media, the U.S. Supreme Court has announced that it will take up the issue of same-sex marriage again this term.
A new smartphone app claims to be 99% effective in preventing pregnancy.
And a pro-life women's center in Denver is celebrating the birth of its 100th baby.
Stay tuned for all these stories and more here on Heroic Media.
So here at Heroic Media, we deal with headlines that deal with issues of marriage and family and life. And the reason that we focus on those issues is that they're so fundamental to society. They're moral issues that really help build the basis and the foundation of our society.
Right, and a lot of times the stories we'll cover will be around topics like abortion, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, and homosexual marriage.
Exactly.
So what's our first story, Michelle?
Thanks, Patrick. First for today. The U.S. Supreme Court has announced that it will again take up the topic of same-sex marriage in a case that could have massive implications for the entire country.
So this is pretty interesting.
Very big.
Obviously a long history here, at least a recent history. A lot of things have gone on with laws and, primarily it seems like there's a lot of overruling. So states have voted by popular vote saying, we want to have marriage be between one man and one woman, the majority of states, 30-something states, I believe it is. And then, we've had higher courts, these rulings taken up to higher courts and then been overturned.
Exactly.
So this will be a really interesting ruling to see what happens. I mean, obviously right now all we can do is speculate, but yeah.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts?
And so what happened here, to give our viewers a little bit more background, in 2013, the summer of 2013, the Supreme Court ruled and it struck down part of the Defense of Marriage Act.
Right.
And that had been a law that said for federal purposes, marriage is the union of one man and one woman.
Right.
And basically what the Supreme Court said in 2013 is, well, you can't do that. The states are allowed to define marriage for themselves, and you have to respect what the states say. So if if one state allows same-sex marriage, you have to recognize it for that state.
Right.
And in this case, what they're doing is they're looking at the question of whether or not states have to recognize the same-sex marriages of other states.
Right.
And so what that could lead to is a more widespread, okay, because one state defines it this way, everyone has to accept that.
Right.
So we'll see, and it's not necessary that they will rule that way. It's possible.
Yeah.
Because in their 2013 ruling, they actually did not find that there is some fundamental right to marry across the board. They just left it up to the states. So this ruling is really going to be potentially the bigger one in terms of a big widespread effect very quickly for the entire country.
Right, and I mean, I'm the ever optimist, I guess, but I think based on the history that you just laid out there with DOMA and everything, I think that it should rule in the favor of pro-traditional marriage, or what marriage actually is, union between one man and one woman. But I think at the very least that they would definitely define, like, listen, here at the state level, if a particular state votes yes, then this is what marriage is, then that's what it is. There's no rolling it up to the next level. So that's how I feel. I don't know. I think I'm hoping that at the very worst that's what happens. Right. Obviously we would hope that there would be some sort of federal ruling that takes a place over that's in favor of Christian viewpoints on marriage. But.
Right. And I think the question is whether or not you view marriage as merely a civil institution that the state can change and redefine as it wants, or if you say, no, this is reflecting a natural human institution that has to do with procreation. And if that's how you view it, then it's not something that the state has the authority to just redefine. Yes. And yet when we see what's happened, as you mentioned, the majority of states actually had voter-approved measures that said marriage is the union of one man and one woman. Now there are 36 states that recognize same-sex marriage, and of those, 25 had it imposed by the courts.
Wow.
So 25, that's half of our country. Half of
Yeah.
the states in our country had same-sex marriage imposed by the courts. It's not the people voting. That's only happened in 3 instances where the people themselves have actually voted.
In favor, yeah.
It's the courts. And most of these cases have happened in the last 2 years. There have been 28 cases in the last 2 years where the states have changed, have shifted to a pro same-sex marriage view. So there's a very quick shift in momentum. It's happening through the courts, and it's a very intentional push to change the political landscape of our country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is very timely because that sort of overruling needs to stop, in my opinion. I mean, obviously I'm somewhat biased, but I really think that hopefully we have some good news on our next episode.
Yeah,
so.
we'll see what happens.
All right, moving on to our next story. A new app has been designed that is set to help women prevent pregnancy. Also, this new app claims to be 99% effective. So this is kind of interesting. It's bringing kind of natural family planning into kind of the digital mobile app era. And there's a bunch of other apps that are also being launched around the same time. But this particular one called Natural Cycles claims to be 99% effective. And it's really pretty neat how it works. And it's very timely as well, is what I got out of this. What were your thoughts?
I think, I think this is very interesting. I think that if you look at the science behind it, it's, absolutely the latest and most developed science in reproductive health.
Right.
I think we should review a little bit about what the church teaches on this. So the church is opposed to artificial contraception, things like the condom and the pill. The church sees human life, children, as a gift and a blessing, and it also sees human sexuality as a gift and a blessing. And so we're not always called to have another child, and it's a matter of prayer and discernment. Sometimes you're called to wait for a while to have a child, but we shouldn't do that in such a way that destroys our human sexuality and that alters our body and makes us infertile or that tries to render the sexual act sterile.
Exactly.
But God has given us this system where we can actually tell if we are fertile or not for a woman, because women are not always fertile. And then when you're choosing to try to avoid having a pregnancy, you abstain during those times. And so this app is just helping women track that and keep track of whether or not they're fertile. And the success rates for natural family planning, modern methods, are just as or more effective than the pill. We're talking about 99% effective.
Yep, and that's why I say it's so timely, because especially here where we live in Colorado, there tends to be a focus on, hey, I need to, eat organic and natural, and I don't want anything with hormones in my milk or my meat or anything like that, right? And then you've got, lots of women who take hormonal contraceptives, which are rated as a class 1 carcinogen, and are really horrible. So it's kind of like this contradictory view. But I think a lot of women now are. It's a good timing to have something like this, especially in digital format, and something that's really easy. I think a lot of people. I know you know of another app that has had like 500,000 downloads. So it seems like there is quite a market for it.
I think it's growing, especially among a younger generation of people who say, wait a second, I've seen the consequences of this. I've seen the side effects, the weight gain, and the mood swings, and just all the things that go with this, and I don't want that. And we don't want to put those hormones into our body every single day. And so this is catching on even among non-Catholics or people who don't hold these same moral views. The other one that I was mentioning, Kindara, that over 500,000 downloads, and that was created in Boulder. So we're looking at a very environmentally friendly, environmentally conscious type of thing, and we're finding women saying, I don't want to have to suppress my own sexuality and my own person. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't need to treat pregnancy as a disease. I can respect my fertility and my sexuality and myself as a human person. Yeah,
and I don't need to go have some surgical procedure or have some sort of invasive procedure or potentially give myself cancer. And so this is a really nice alternative. The most difficult, if you could call it that, part about it is, taking your basal temperature when you wake up in the morning, every morning. And abstaining from sex might be difficult for some people, but, it's not, there's a small window every month that you would have to do that. So it's good to have self-control as well. So I think it's good in a lot of different ways. And I'm glad you also mentioned environmental, because so many times in today's life, there's all these environmental issues with pollution and things like that. And I know water pollution is also a huge issue with the pill, and estrogen levels have skyrocketed inside of our water supply because of the pill.
Right, and then you get mutant fish and all these kinds of other problems, and they're going, wait a second, why are the male fish turning into female fish?
Right.
And really weird stuff. What do you think that's doing to us when
Exactly.
there's a much higher rate of hormone imbalances than there used to be, and we look at the reasons for that. And another thing, I think another big benefit of using natural family planning, because you're respecting your body and you're getting to know yourself and your fertility, is that if you do have any kind of health issues, you can pinpoint them and solve them, rather than the pill is just a Band-Aid. And it's so common for women to go into the doctor complaining of some kind of problem and, oh, here's the pill. But that's not solving the problem.
Right.
Maybe you're having reproductive health issues because you actually have undiagnosed celiac disorder, or because your thyroid is not functioning properly. There could be an underlying problem there.
Absolutely.
And through NFP, it's actually designed to help you identify and solve those problems, rather than just leaving them untreated until they show up elsewhere in your life and cause more problems.
Right, absolutely. And having that kind of holistic approach is a really good idea. I know a new clinic opened here recently, Bella, and they focus kind of on that holistic approach. And this app can help you. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a very good point, because it's usually some sort of systemic issue. And so the app itself, just to give a little bit of details, the way it works is every morning you input your temperature, and based on your temperature, you can track your fertility cycles. And so apparently, I haven't seen the app myself, but it's got like a little view that shows basically like a green day is there's a 99% chance that if you have intercourse, you're not going to get pregnant. And then the red days are days that you would get pregnant if you were to have intercourse. Not you would, but you're highly likely
more likely
to.
Right, exactly.
So it makes it very simple also, which I like. And I know this Natural Cycles app, they kind of separate themselves, or at least they say they separate themselves from the crowd, because they have a very complex algorithm that does a lot of calculations based on the information that you give. And so that's why they also claim the 99% effective. So.
Right, and I think that we're moving toward this. It'll be interesting to see some of the ratings and the reviews of these type of apps as they become more prominent, and also to see where they go, to see what kind of popularity. The other app that I mentioned, Kindar, they've been featured in the New York Times and in Forbes, so they're getting a lot of mainstream attention, and I'm eager to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it could really catch on big time, and I'm really curious to see if like Planned Parenthood or anybody else has any sort of like backlash to this type of thing, right? Because they claim to care so much about women and their health, but this is such an easy alternative to birth control. So.
Absolutely. Coming up after the break, we will talk with the director of a women's health clinic in Denver that is celebrating the birth of their 100th baby.
Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Heroic Media. In case you're just joining us, I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman. In our next story, Lighthouse Women's Center, a pro-life women's health clinic in Denver, recently celebrated the birth of its 100th baby. I actually had the opportunity to sit down and talk with Lynn Grandin, the director of the Respect Life office at the Archdiocese of Denver. Lynn is also the executive director of Lighthouse Women's Center. Let's see what she had to say. Lynn, it's always such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be back.
So let's start by giving our viewers some background on Lighthouse Women's Center. When was it founded? What does it do?
Lighthouse Women's Center is a licensed medical center here in Denver, and we opened in 2012 in October in response to the second largest Planned Parenthood in the whole United States, which is here in the Denver area. And some Catholics located property right across the street from there, and so we gutted a home that was there and redesigned it into a medical center and opened at that time.
Wow, and so it's right across from the Planned Parenthood?
Right across the street on purpose, of course.
Okay. and you baby number 100, you've just passed that mark. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What was your reaction?
We have, last week, one of our nurses called, and we always have a protocol for following up with our moms. Some of them, it's a little harder to stay in contact with them because they're teens, and so she called and said, I just want to give a little bit of follow-up that we've had 5 more babies born this week. I've been working hard on that, and I started hollering, and she said, what's the matter? And I just said, don't you realize what this means? And she said, no. And I said, I have stickers all over my computer that keeps a running tally of how many babies that we've had born. And I said, my sticker on my computer says 95. So this means we've hit 100. And I ripped that sticker off with the big 100 on it, and I ran throughout Catholic Charities Administration building and was hollering and showing everyone, and everyone was rejoicing with us because it's a big milestone.
Wow, that's wonderful, wonderful. And many of these women that you see, they're deciding whether they're going to have an abortion or whether they're going to choose life. In your experience, what is it that tips the scale? What makes them decide one way or the other? Is there something generally that does that?
Well, for us medically, often it's when they see an ultrasound image. And it's not just seeing the image. We know for sure medically that it kicks in the maternal instinct, that they see that little baby. The first baby that I ever saved from abortion was with a 16-year-old girl, and right when we put that on her tummy, that little baby went like this. And she just went, is she waving at me? And that did it. You know, so often it's maternal instinct, but many times we just have to identify what her greatest fear is and address that fear. Or the other strong influence is letting them know absolutely, concretely, that they are not alone because they feel alone.
So fear and loneliness are what are going to be driving them to that abortion clinic then?
Those are usually the strongest influences for girls thinking they have to abort. But when we answer that fear and discuss that fear with them and meet it and answer her fears, or we say to her, you're not alone, you don't have to do this alone. There are people that will come alongside you and help you. Often those two things will be a great turning point.
I can imagine, and I think that's such a huge part of the pro-life movement. We can't just tell people, no, don't do this, don't do this. Of course, abortion is wrong, it's killing a human person, one of God's children, but we also have to give them a yes. We have to say, let us help you with this. Here's how you're gonna do it. We're gonna give you these resources. We're going to stand with you. What would you say are the biggest resources or the biggest needs that these women have? Are they physical, material? Are they emotional? What do they need?
There isn't a biggest one, Michelle, honestly. Women are so unique. Their needs are so unique. But in Denver, we have what's called a continuum of care with Catholic Charities here. We're not a standalone medical center.
Okay.
We've aligned with Catholic Charities, and so anything they need, if it's homeless shelter, if it's domestic abuse shelter, if it's material goods, if it's financial assistance, if it's caring for and helping the baby they already have, we have that spectrum of care that comes alongside them that's very unique, and we hope to really solidify that methodology so that we can promote that in other Catholic Charities agencies throughout the United States.
That's great. That's wonderful. What services are offered at Lighthouse Women's Center itself?
All free medical services, so of course the traditional pregnancy testing, ultrasound imaging, counseling, but then we sit and refer them and go through our entire referral manual to find out what resources they need and spend a lot of time with that, and that's a great help to them.
That makes sense. For our viewers that might be interested in getting out, becoming more involved in the pro-life movement, we're around the time of the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. Do you have any advice for them? What are some things they can do?
I would say please get out and pray. Just go on a regular basis, even if it's only an hour a month. Go to abortion centers near you and pray so that people in your communities pray every hour that they are open. And those of you that have means, please support centers like ours. We need to expand. We need to do more things on university campuses. There's lots to do. Find your niche. Use the gifts that God has given you, and let's work toward a culture of life.
Absolutely. Well, Lynn, congratulations on baby number 100, and thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless.
Great conversation you guys had. I really like that. Congratulations to them, 100 babies, that's awesome.
Yep.
I love how 5 babies came all in all at once at the end there for them to reach that milestone, so that's awesome. And I really liked what she had to say about, you asked her about what really tipped the scales for them to go to the pro-life side of things. And she mentioned fear and loneliness as the two things, that if you could overcome those two things, that would really help people kind of become pro-life. And I think coming up in a story after the break, I think there's also a tie into that as well. There's a sense of, you don't want to be alone, and there's a fear with pregnancy, whether you're intending to have pregnancy or not, there's always those kind of feelings. So knowing that you're not alone, being a part of a community is really important.
Yep, that's huge.
And I really liked what she had to say about the ultrasounds, because we've talked before on the show about the ultrasounds and how effective they are, that when certain states require that if you're going to have an abortion that you get an ultrasound. And I really loved that she talked about that connection, that instinct, that motherly instinct, that when you get that ultrasound, there are certain things that kind of trigger at certain periods of time, and certain things that a mother might see that really help that instinct kick in and take over. I thought that was really fascinating.
It's very interesting, and I think it's interesting to note that Planned Parenthood always opposes the ultrasound laws, and people who have gone in there say that they never show you the ultrasound. For a group that's so pro-choice and they really want to help women, it's interesting that they don't want to show them that ultrasound that's going to trigger that maternal instinct.
It works very well. All right, stay tuned. We have one more story coming up after the break. Welcome back to Heroic Media. In our final story, Catholic blogger Hallie Lord recently shared her thoughts on women who experience mixed feelings after they learn that they have become pregnant. So I think that this was an interesting blog because a lot of times, especially in Christian or Catholic circles, pro-life circles, there seems to be this perception that if you're having a baby, like you have no fears, it's like exactly what you intended to be at the time you intended to be, and you're open to life, like all the time, 100%, no concerns. But really what she says is that, via her blogs, that like once or twice a month, she'll get an email from somebody who reads her blogs that's like, hey, I'm feeling kind of apprehensive about being pregnant. I'm Christian and I am open to life, but I have these feelings like, maybe does God know what He's doing? Should I be really having a baby right now? And so I think it's important to kind of talk about that, and hence her recent blog, sharing her feelings on the subject as well as sharing what she has experienced in the community. What were your thoughts?
I think it's so important that she's bringing this out into the open. And a few weeks ago we covered a story that was kind of similar about some women saying that they just hate being pregnant and they feel kind of guilty because we're supposed to be pro-life and be this good Christian witness, but sometimes you just hate being pregnant. And I think this is the same kind of way. We know that children are a gift from God. We know that it's a blessing, and we absolutely respect that. But that doesn't mean we have to be in denial if there's any kind of fear or kind of nervousness. I think that's natural. And I really like what she says when people, questioning, like, am I a bad mother? Am I a bad Christian? Am I a bad pro-lifer because I have these fears? And what she says is, no, you are simply a member of a huge, life-giving, brave community of women who sometimes feel scared and angry and so very, very ill-equipped to accept the mission that God has entrusted to you. And
Right.
isn't that sometimes the case of all of us?
Yeah, even throughout the Bible, right? Like, you know, God sends people on missions, and you know, a lot of times they're afraid or they're fearful or
Absolutely.
they're
Look
like,
at-
I don't know if I can do it. You know, I stutter. You know, like
Right,
different.
Moses, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a natural. It's just part it's just part of human nature, right? And I think that it's important for us to acknowledge that that's a natural thing to feel, right? We're not just because we're Christian doesn't mean we're some superhuman, like, you know, all of the effects of the fall and what we feel and fear and, you know, disordered passions and things like that. You know, everybody experiences those things. So I think it's important also for the pro-abortion side to see that, because you know, it's one of those ways that you can bridge the gap. Like,
Absolutely.
You know, like
Absolutely.
our last story, we're talking a lot about like being, you know, fearful and things like that for women coming to these crisis pregnancy centers, and that's one of the hurdles to overcome. And even among women that are open to life, you know, you still have that fear, and it's important to have that community and to overcome that fear. And that's really what she says in her blog. You know, she's like, we're here for you. You know, you're not alone.
And on a related note, I think fear and loneliness go together, because she's saying that she's getting all these emails regularly from women who feel fearful, but they don't want to speak up about it.
Right,
And so she's saying, hey guys, look, we're all in this together. As soon as you realize, oh, there's a bunch of other women who share that fear, then at least you're a little less lonely.
Yeah.
And it helps to say, okay, there's someone else who feels that way.
Right.
And then it actually helps the pro-life ministry to be able to go out and say, hey, I felt the same way you did. I was scared, I was nervous, I was fearful. But you know, it ended up being a huge blessing. There are people who can help you, and look at these resources that are available.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I like her little subtitle that she has on her blog, which is HallieLord.com. It says, love fearlessly, live passionately. And I think that really tied into this particular blog that she had as well, the fearless and you know, and loving, because she talks about, yeah, you know, I love that little child growing within me. And, you know, she talks about, you know, kind of developing a relationship, you know, in the womb with this child and everything, but she still feels these sense of fear and things like that, and timing, you know, is it right? And I mean, I know from my own experience with myself and my wife that, you know, even with our last child came a lot sooner than we had expected. And so I know she had some of those same types of concerns that were spoken of in this blog, and those fears. And so, you know, I think for me, the best way I deal with it, and of course I'm not the one that's pregnant, but you know, I'm in it with her, you know, is to just kind of focus and just try to refocus on the fact that, you know, God knows the best plan, and that He's got you covered.
Right.
And so just putting your faith in God, I think, really helps me, you know, overcome those certain fears and anxieties and worries.
That's a really good point, and I think that it's important to notice that the man can actually feel this too, that the father, you're in this together, as you mentioned, and so you're also involved in this, and so working together, talking together, praying together is a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you know, you feel all kinds of fear about good things that happen in your life, right? There might be like a job promotion, or there might be you know, buying a house, or you know, starting a new job. Even, you know, there's always these big milestones that happen in your life, and it's something that you're looking forward to. But then when you get to them, like buying a house, you're like, oh my gosh, you know, should I really be spending like you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars is a lot of money, you know, or taking on school debt. So it's a natural thing to feel when you have these things that you are looking forward to, but then when they finally get there, you're like, oh, geez, you know, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely normal. And I'm glad that this blog is out there, and to, you know, women who are feeling this way, I would just say, you know, put your trust in God and talk to other women, talk to people around you, have a support group, talk to your husband, and just keep praying.
Absolutely, and ask God every day to give you the graces that you need to, you know, to get through whatever your mission is in life. So
absolutely.
All right, that's it for this week on Heroic Media. Please join us next week for all the up-to-date news on the pro-life issues that matter to you.
Please feel free to write to us with any comments, questions, or news tips at news@heroicmedia.org.
And please visit our website at heroicmedianews.org, where you can check out more stories like the ones we discussed on this episode.
That's it for this week. Until next time, keep us in your prayers.
God bless.